Okay, so in the last video, we were halfway through our step 3, where we were creating the chat for the assistant. And over here, between the quotation marks, is where we want to put the response from ChatGPT. So between these marks, we will insert dynamic data. And because the API call was made in step 2, we will say the result of step 2. And as you might remember from earlier, that the answers coming back from ChatGPT are found under choices. Sometimes there are more responses. They might give you a few options. But in this case, we are just going to take the first item. And from that first item, we want the message content, which is the answer. ChatGPT sometimes could give content with spaces on either side. So a nice way of neatening this up is to trim the text. So just make sure that there are no leading spaces or spaces afterwards. And from here, it gives us the option to go more. And there are lots of options to edit your text. In this case, we're going to use the trimmed option. So this is going to create our JSON over here, and it will be added to the list going forward every time we click ask and generate this workflow. What I am going to do, instead of redoing all of that again, I want to use that same result and that information, and I want to put it under text. So I've just copied and pasted that there. And that's pretty much the workflow for asking the question to ChatGPT. If we go back to the design side, we have our UI over here, but from earlier on, our repeating group is now sitting empty. It's not really going to show us anything because we haven't given it anything to show us. So what we'll do is, first of all, we are going to create a text, and this text we can make the role. So what we'll say, it'll be the current cell's thing, but thing is very vague, and that is because we haven't told it what it should be looking for. So the reason for that is the repeating group doesn't have a type of content. And this repeating group is going to be showing us our list of chats. And to do that, we're going to have to look for them. So we'll do a search for chats. You can filter it later on, but for now, since these are the only chats happening in this app, search for chats is sufficient. So now when I go back to my text box and I try that again, current cell's chat appears. And because we want to say who was doing what in this particular cell, we're going to say that this is the GPT role. And because GPT role was a option set, in option sets, the basic default is display. So you have to select display. Underneath that, we'll put the question or answer from the chat. So that'll be another text box. And over here, we will say this is the current cell's chats text. We won't put JSON because that isn't how we want to read it. We want to just read the text. So we'll say text. To differentiate these, I'll just make this bold so that we can have the user or the role highlighted and then the information below. So that's our repeating group. And if we preview this now, I'll click on preview. We have our very basic chatbot, and I'll ask a question. I'll say, what are the primary colors? And ask. Straight away, my question is created as the user. And what we are looking for is a response from OpenAI to tell us what the colors are. And we should see that show up in this repeating group. There we go. The assistant has replied saying the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. And it's gone on to give more information, which we could perfect when we made this repeating group more appealing. To show that this is all contextual, I'm going to ask a vague question relating to that, saying, what are the first letters for each of them. Without any context, that's a very random question to ask, so let's see what happens. It should just come back with R, B, and Y. Well, there we go. They've elaborated, but the first letters for each of the primary colors are R for red, B for blue, and then it's obviously quite a long answer instead of giving me 3 letters. But you can see without any context, it was able to answer the question. So that is basically it for our chatbot. We have connected our API connector to OpenAI's API using the documentation. We've also followed the guide, which gave us an example of how ChatGPT memorizes the history of the conversation for context. And we have done our workflows, very simple workflow, maybe a bit of interesting stuff in the middle, but basically it allows us to create this very simple chatbot. We can also look into stylizing this a bit, which we can look into in another video.